So right now I am joined by my friend Suzanne. Say hi, Suzanne.
Mhm.
Okay, that
Hi.
was a weird way of saying hi. Hi. So today, what we're going to be talking about is spirituality. Now, um, unlike most conversations I've had on spirituality, it's usually from the Judeo-Christian perspective. But Suzanne, what I love talking with her is she has a unique it's not Eastern, it's more indigenous American, not even North American, but it's South American. Not even South American, but a certain part of Colombian. In any case, what exactly is your worldview on spirituality? What is spirituality? Let's start there.
So my worldview, it's like evolved over the years, being that um I do work in the industries that I do, and so it requires to be very diverse. I'm obviously not going to say the names, but I work as a caregiver, and I'm training down the line to become a funeral director. Right now, I'm trying to become an arrangement counselor, and in this work, you have to be very respect a lot of different cultures and different spiritualities because you're literally dealing with a person's life and who they are, and to give the best care or even honor a person's passing, you have to respect this whole insane immense view of their life that includes their spirituality and their culture. So you have to hold space for that. And so the way I see spirituality is it's very unique to the person. I know that I have my beliefs and it's unique to me and it works for me and it makes me a decent person. And I kind of just go by how that person is personality wise and how they affect the world around them.
Mhm. So, how what like yeah, I mean, that's one thing I will say is that Suzanne is extremely tolerant of a lot of different worldviews, and that that's one of the reasons why I have so much respect for you. But specifically, your worldview,
Mm-hmm.
what exactly is it, and how did you come to it?
So a lot of my spiritual beliefs started with honestly the work of being diverse and understanding my own diversity, which was delving into who am I and where did my ancestors came from. It started in a very funny way, actually. I started diving into the community here in Santa Barbara, but I eventually found a person who her name's Barbara Bain, but she does like indigenous psychology, and I started
Wait, is
working.
there is there a specific psychology for indigenous people?
Um, well, so it's a certain major that she does, but yes, I would actually say that there's a specific psychology dynamics that you have to account for because there is a lot of past traumas that come from the culture that you have to recognize and learn on how they're approaching life. Like I know that a lot of where
But
I come from.
it'd be different from like black psychology or Armenian psychology. Like there's like native or indigenous psychology.
Yeah, because like we all have like yes, we've all been oppressed, but we all have the different histories that come from our oppression that is unique to us that needs to be accounted for. I know like and even the individual family. Like I know from my family, there was a lot of hiding the fact that we were indigenous and being very ashamed of that. And I am not the only indigenous person that experienced that from their family members because like there are some people recently I met that their family for a long time thought they were Mexican and lo and behold it turns out that they're Shumash. And so
Chumash is the local Native Americans of the Santa Barbara area, for
yeah.
those who don't know.
And so like a lot of with like indigenous psychology is kind of dealing with all that shame and all that societal pressure to conform and even erase the culture altogether and kind of learning who you are and actually the habits you build on from all that. I wouldn't say mental abuse, but like definitely mental oppression, well, which is mental abuse. So it is a certain extent a mental abuse that's hidden within society that is encouraged. And so there needs to be a lot to be undone because some of that is enforced by your own self, because you're taught so long to be ashamed that the moment you start accepting it, you have to break certain habits about being okay with being indigenous. And for a long time, I wasn't even comfortable saying that I was mixed indigenous. So I had to get comfortable with being proud of being mixed indigenous. So it's a lot of work in that. And so Barbara Bain, she does an approach of like using dream work, not to actually help you embrace your indigenous self, but more understanding how dream medicine has gotten back into your culture and how it's part of you as an indigenous person. She does her own work, but personally, how her work affected me was it encouraged my interest in asking more questions to my mom and my family. I know that at one point, I think it was a year ago, I had the courage to call one of my aunts, because there was a time where it was like, don't ask these questions to your family member because you might piss them off or you might start whatever. But there was a point where after doing so many years of talking to my mom and my family that I just called one of my aunts. And this was after my great grandmother passed away, and I started just asking a ton of questions about her father, my great grandmother's father, and where he was from and which tribes they came from. And like so much information came through. Like I found out that the tribes I'm part of is Pijao and Yalcon. I even ended up finding an elder. It was like so many things got revealed after I got comfortable.
So, I mean, yeah, learning about, I mean, trust me, I'm very proud of my heritage. Learning about my heritage, it's fascinating, it's fun. And it, to a certain extent, it does affect your beliefs. To a certain extent, though, I mean, I'd say that my beliefs on, you know, the political beliefs I have and the philosophical beliefs and certainly the spiritual beliefs, well, maybe, I don't know about spiritual beliefs, but a lot of them are very different from my ancestors, probably are.
Yeah.
So just, you know, just because somebody has parents that are Catholic or Buddhist or whatever doesn't necessarily mean that they are the same thing they were. So there clearly were intellectual reasons or, you know, or empirical reasons why you chose the beliefs you did.
They were, like, I know that I was raised on honoring your ancestors, even though it right now doesn't sound like that was a huge part, but like in South American culture in general, or even Central America, South America, honoring your ancestors and your elders is a huge thing. So to me, it was just an extension of honoring my ancestors and knowing who I was. But like to me, being close to nature and honoring nature and knowing that your environment is a huge part of who you are and respecting that and the energies behind that is like a huge thing for me. And so that my ancestors did that, so it helped me just dive more into that. But my mom, being indigenous, even though she's Catholic, she already was taught a lot about this indigenous culture that she passed down to me. I just ended up choosing that I just wanted to leave the Catholic Church and end up going more deeper into my indigenous spirituality because I felt more connected to that and who I was as a person.
So you left the Catholic Church for your and for the beliefs of your ancestors to delve more deeply into it. What exact? I mean, and the reason you say is because you feel more connected to it. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that the history of the Catholic Church in South America was not a great one dealing with indigenous people, so it kind of became like an integrity issue for me. It's like if I continued going to this place that I know oppressed my ancestors, hurt them, killed them, can I even be here and fully commit to this kind of work? Because there is such a huge discrepancy between what they're doing and what has happened and the way they're holding their beliefs. So
the actions of the Catholic Church were much more impactful to you than what they actually believe. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, it was a lot more impactful, and I couldn't honor my ancestors while being in the Catholic Church, and so I personally had to leave. Like those who stay, like my mom, she's fine being Catholic and being to church, and it helps her, and I respect that. But for me, it just became such a huge integrity issue for me that I couldn't do it and be okay with myself.
So, getting on, this is really interesting, into the beliefs of the indigenous peoples. Do you think that there's anything that folks or people who held to indigenous beliefs did in the past that are, make you feel uncomfortable? Because I mean, obviously the Catholic Church has done a lot of horrible things. You and I can talk for a long time about all the mistakes that people who are Catholic have done. But I'm sure that people with indigenous beliefs similar to yours have also committed similar atrocities. Probably not on the same scale, but do you in any way believe that that causes a change in your how do you react to that?
Well, I've been learning the history, and so far I haven't encountered anything from my personal tribes that have done it. Like has done their own stuff. Like there's a great grandmother who like fought the people colonizing her, but I'm like at the same time I'm like, well, if someone was colonizing me, I would fight for me.
Right. But well, I'm saying it's mostly on a historical knowledge base, because obviously Native Americans of, both, all around were not necessarily known for keeping detailed records of everything.
Yeah.
So, do you think that could there be a historical revelation that may change your opinion on your beliefs?
I don't know, because like I've always still leaned because of my father, because he was Gnostic Christian, and even my mom to be more like environment, nature oriented, that I would still pursue working with nature and honoring the ancestors, because my huge thing basis on my spirituality has been honoring my ancestors.
I see.
And so that's kind of how I approach my spirituality, is like, does this honor my ancestors and how can I get closer to them, and who I am, and learning and develop myself in doing so.
So in a hypothetical sense, what happens if you come across one of your ancestors and it turns out this person was just an awful garbage human being? And that can happen to virtually anybody. And I'm sure if you go far, some of my ancestors probably committed rape or murder. How do you? How do you respect those as well, or how do you?
Well, I respect them because they're my ancestors, because I've encountered that. But I do try to learn from their mistakes, and I do not enforce what they have done. I'm like, so I delve into that stuff and trying to learn on what was their mindset and going here. And because I do have an ancestors that oppress the other half of my ancestors, so I had to do a lot of work in being someone who's mixed indigenous. I do have Spaniard blood as well. And so I have to like find the balance of like, I want to honor you and the person you are and the good that you have done, but I do also want to acknowledge that I did not respect what you did here and how this oppressed this other half. And I do a lot of work doing that, because the fact of the matter is I do come from these two people, these two lineages, and I have to learn to appreciate where I can and then go like, this is not awesome, and I force this in my life, and this is something I can learn from to what not to do.
So do you approach your ancestor as a case-by-case basis, or just as a grand sort of oneness, your ancestors or ancestor? How do you approach it?
It's interesting because like you can approach them into that big view, and sometimes I do, like, these are my ancestors, but I do work one-on-one with certain ancestors that I connect with more. Some I knew in life, and some I've knew through family members, and then others I've read about. One of those ancestors were the ones I'm like, I'm not entirely thrilled about you, but you're my ancestor, so let's read this book.
Right.
And so, but it's good because like, it's like in my work, learning about your shadow is equal amount of learning about yourself. And so that means is learning about all the icky stuff your ancestors also did, and going like, well, how can I learn from this and move forward and teach those who come forward for me, from like who are my kids, and tell them like, this is what your ancestor did and it wasn't freaking cool. Let's not do that.
Yeah. Guys, let's just not do this. Cool? Okay. So, final question. Do you remember your ancestors? or do you respect your ancestors?
I
Or
remember them and respect them because, like, my great grandmother, who is now an ancestor for me, I knew her, like, she was like part of my life growing up. 5 years ago, she passed away. I went to Colombia because her final request of when she wanted to pass away was that she wanted to see me again before she died. So that's what I did. She saw me again before she died, and she passed away the day after I left Colombia. And so, like, my great grandmother and my grandfather are the ancestors I work with a lot. Like, my grandfather, I didn't know in life, but I learned about him through my mom. And I work with him and respect him and try to learn as much as I can about him. And then with my great grandmother, I definitely knew in life and loved her in life and love her in death. So
there you go. Well, it's a very, very, very small thumbnail of Suzanne's thoughts and beliefs on spirituality. Thank you so much for this great conversation. I thought it was very fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll be seeing you all next time.
yeah, awesome.